Imagine the sterile hum of hospital machines, my tiny body, barely 4 months old, fighting for every breath in the NICU. Tubes snaking across my fragile skin, monitors beeping like a countdown to oblivion. That's when they left me. My parents, Darlene and Ray, signed away their rights with a scribbled signature and vanished into the night, leaving me for dead, while my grandmother Mabel scraped together pennies to save me. No calls, no cards, no regrets. Just a cold abandonment that shaped my life into one of quiet strength, independence, and unbreakable resolve. Fast forward decades. I've built everything from nothing: a fulfilling career, a loving fiancé, and a wedding on the horizon. But then they slither back, broke, grinning like nothing happened, arms outstretched for family help. Oh, the audacity. They crash my engagement party, weaving tales of hardship, eyes gleaming at my inheritance from Grandpa Earl. And the ultimate betrayal. My mother corners my fiancé in a hushed corner, whispering poison. Grace isn't stable. Marry her sister Lily, instead she's the real family jewel. He wavers. The room spins. Humiliation burns like fire in my veins. But I smile. I stay silent. Because I've kept every receipt, the hospital bills, the forged papers, the hidden letters exposing their greed. As the tension builds, I drop a bombshell that silences the crowd, unraveling their web of lies in a cascade of shocking twists. Forged identities, secret payouts, and a puppet master pulling strings from the shadows. Stick around, because this isn't just revenge. It's justice served ice cold. You'll witness betrayals that gut you, twists that flip the script, and a payoff so satisfying it'll leave you cheering. Who walks away empty-handed? Watch till the end. You won't believe it. My name is Grace Carter. 55 years old. High school English teacher for the past 32 years. And the woman everyone in Willow Creek calls the Rock. I was raised by my grandmother Mabel after my parents vanished when I was 4 months old and fighting for my life in the NICU. She taught me that decency costs nothing, and receipts cost everything, so I learned to keep both. The October sun slid low over the white clapboard church, turning the potluck tables gold. Folding chairs scraped across the fellowship hall floor, while Mrs. Henderson's lemon bars disappeared faster than gossip. I stood near the coffee urn, refilling Ruth's cup. Ruth Kincaid, my best friend since junior high debate club, and the only attorney in 3 counties who still answers her phone on Sunday. She wore her usual navy blazer sleeves, pushed up silver hair, twisted into a knot that said she'd come straight from reviewing depositions. "You're glowing," she told me, nudging my shoulder. "Wedding planning. Agreeing with you?" I smiled, thinking of David's quiet proposal under the maple behind the school, the way he'd slipped Grandma Mabel's plain gold band onto my finger, like it had always belonged there. 3 months and counting, I said. Venue's booked dress is altered, and the caterer swears she can feed 100 on meatloaf and dignity. Ruth laughed, the sound warm and familiar, when the side door banged open hard enough to rattle the hymnals. Heads turned. 2 strangers stepped inside, bringing with them the smell of cheap gasoline and cheaper perfume. Darlene wore a leopard print jacket 2 sizes too small and a smile stretched tight across teeth that had seen better decades. Ray followed, belly leading the way, suspenders straining hair slicked back with something that caught the light like cooking oil. They scanned the room the way gamblers scan a poker table. Grace Elizabeth, Darlene's voice carried over the chatter like a fire alarm. "There's my baby girl." Every spine in the room straightened. I felt Ruth's hand settle on my elbow, steady as a compass. Darlene barreled forward, arms flung wide. The hug smelled of menthol cigarettes and desperation. Ray hung back, rocking on worn boots, thumbs hooked in his pockets. "Family reunion," he announced to no one in particular. "Ain't that something?" I let the embrace happen, counted to 3, then stepped back. "It's been a long time," I said, voice level, the same tone I used when a sophomore swore he'd turned in homework that never existed. Darlene's eyes glistened, whether from emotion or calculation, I couldn't tell. 45 years, she whispered. "We never stopped thinking about you, honey. Life just got complicated. Ray cleared his throat. Real complicated. Medical bills, bad investments. But blood's blood, right? He spread his hands, palms up, the universal gesture for empty. Mrs. Henderson paused mid-bite. Pastor Jim set down his plate. The room's easy hum thinned to a cautious murmur. Ruth leaned close. Script's familiar, she murmured. Act 1, tears. Act 2, ask for money. I nodded almost imperceptibly. Darlene was already launching into a story about hospital stays and a cousin's funeral neither of us had been invited to. Ray chimed in with details about a trailer payment 3 months overdue. Their voices overlapped, eager, practiced. I listened the way I listened to students reciting excuses, cataloging inconsistencies. Darlene's left hand kept fluttering to her wrist, twisting something shiny. A bracelet. Thin gold links, a single heart charm. My stomach dipped. I had seen that bracelet before on a Polaroid tucked inside the envelope Mabel gave me when I turned 18. The photo showed a tired young woman in a hospital corridor, newborn me swaddled against her chest, the bracelet glinting under fluorescent lights. The same woman who signed the temporary guardianship form and walked out forever. Darlene caught me staring. Her fingers closed protectively over the charm. Pretty, isn't it? She said, voice syrupy. Family heirloom. Been in the family forever. Ruth's grip tightened on my arm. Grace, she said under her breath. Tell me that's not... It is. I answered so softly only she could hear. Across the room, David appeared in the doorway. Tie-loosened sleeves rolled, carrying a tray of iced tea for the youth group. His smile faltered when he spotted the newcomers. I lifted my hand in a small wave. Steady, everything's fine, though. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Darlene followed my gaze. Her expression shifted, calculating. That your fiancé? She asked loud enough for half the room to hear. Handsome man. We should all sit down soon, talk family matters. Ray rubbed his palms together. Maybe over coffee. Or something stronger. The lemon bars suddenly tasted like ash in my mouth. I excused myself to check the dessert table, needing distance, needing air. Behind me, Darlene's laughter floated too bright, too sharp. Ruth caught up as I reached the hallway. You okay? I pressed my back to the cool, cinder block wall. They're wearing the bracelet from the abandonment photo, I said. The one Mabel kept in the fireproof box. Ruth's eyes narrowed. Then they didn't just come for potluck. No, I said, fingers brushing the simple gold band on my left hand. They came for everything else. From the fellowship hall, Darlene's voice rose again, calling my name like a claim. I closed my eyes, breathed in the faint scent of lemon and candle wax, and felt the first thread of the trap tighten around us all. In Darlene's hand is the bracelet Grace recognizes from the photo of the night she was abandoned at the hospital. The bracelet glinted in Darlene's hand like a taunt, and the fellowship hall noise faded to a dull roar in my ears. I excused myself with the murmur about needing water, and slipped into the narrow corridor that led to the church office, the cool plaster walls steadying my back. Ruth followed, but I lifted a palm. Give me a minute. She understood. She always did. I shut the door, leaned against it, and let the memory I had spent 55 years boxing up come flooding in. It was February 1970, the kind of cold that crept through hospital windows no matter how many blankets they piled on. I know this not because I remember, but because Mabel told the story so many times it became my own heartbeat. She was 62, widowed, living on a pension, and the eggs her hens still bothered to lay. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. The nurse's voice cracked like thin ice. Mrs. Mabel Carter. Your granddaughter is failing. The parents have signed temporary guardianship and left. We need someone here now. Mabel threw a coat over her flannel nightgown, drove the 12 miles to County General with the heater broken, and arrived to find me 4 months old, 3 pounds after the weight loss. Skin translucent under the bilirubin lights. The NICU smelled of alcohol and warm plastic. Incubators hummed in rows like glass coffins. My bassinet sat at the far end, wires taped to my chest, a ventilator tube down my throat, because my lungs had forgotten their job. Mabel stood outside the isolette in borrowed scrubs, pressing her palm to the clear wall, as if she could will strength through the plastic. The charge nurse, Helen Rowe, name I would not learn for another 18 years, handed her a clipboard. Sign here for emergency consent. The mother already did for the transfer, but we need a guardian of record. Mabel's hand shook so badly the pen left grooves in the paper, but she wrote her name in careful schoolteacher cursive. Darlene and Ray had been there earlier or so, the log said. Darlene wore the leopard print jacket even then, though it fit better in 1970. She signed the temporary delegation of parental rights on a form that expired in 30 days. Ray added his scrawl beneath hers, the ink smudging where his thumb had sweated. They told the social worker they were overwhelmed, that the baby's prognosis was hopeless, that they had nowhere to turn. Then they walked out past the vending machines, past the security desk that never asked for ID, and disappeared into the snow. The envelope they left was manila, sealed with clear tape labeled simply, Grace Elizabeth Carter, do not open until majority. A nurse clipped it to the chart with a red plastic fastener. No one thought to question it. Abandoned babies were rare, but paperwork was king. Mabel took me home 6 weeks later, still on oxygen, still under 4 pounds. The farmhouse smelled of wood smoke and Vicks VapoRub. She sold the Buick to pay the first hospital bill, took in ironing with one hand, while rocking my cradle with the other. Every copay, every pharmacy receipt, every scribbled growth chart went into a series of biscuit tins lined up on the top shelf of the pantry. She labeled them by year in black marker, 1970, 1971, 1972. When the tins overflowed, she switched to accordion folders, then banker's boxes. Evidence, she called it, though she never explained of what. She taught me to read using the back of utility bills, to count using the stamps on clinic envelopes. By the time I was 5, I could recite the exact cost of a 3-day NICU stay. $3.60 adjusted for inflation, and I understood that love was measured in canceled checks. The letter inside the manila envelope waited until my 18th birthday. Mabel baked a lopsided chocolate cake, set the table with her mother's good china, and slid the envelope across the oilcloth like contraband. Your choice, Gracie, she said. Burn it or read it. Either way, it's yours. I chose to read. The paper was thin, the ink faded to brown. Darlene's handwriting looped and slanted. We never meant to hurt you. Circumstances were bigger than us. Please forgive. Ray added a postscript in block letters. Take care of yourself, kid. The apology felt rehearsed, like lines from a play they'd already left the stage of. Tucked beside it was the Polaroid Darlene in the hospital corridor, exhausted bracelet catching the flash me a red-faced bundle against her shoulder. On the back, someone had written in blue ballpoint, property of C. Pike, return if found. Mabel kept that photo in the same folder as the guardianship form, the discharge summary, the itemized bill that listed abandonment consult at $42. She kept the oxygen rental receipts, the formula coupons, the social worker's business card with a coffee stain in the corner. She kept the envelope itself. The tape yellowed. The red clip rusted. Nothing was discarded. Nothing annotated beyond the date. When I asked why she tapped the side of her head, memory fades. Paper doesn't. She died the year I turned 30, leaving me the farmhouse, the biscuit tins, and a note in her spidery script. Use it wisely, Gracie. The truth is in the details. I carried those details like armor. They taught me to initial every substitute teacher contract, to photograph every flat tire before calling KAA to save the voicemail from the principal praising my lesson on The Great Gatsby. I built a life on documentation, on the certainty that if someone ever tried to rewrite my story, I would have the original in triplicate. Standing in the church office, the hum of the fellowship hall leaking under the door, I felt the weight of every receipt Mabel ever saved settle on my shoulders. Darlene's voice floated down the hallway, laughing too loud, telling Mrs. Henderson how proud she was of my daughter, the teacher. I opened the supply cabinet, pulled out the small fireproof safe I kept there for emergency cash, and the original NICU folder. My fingers found the manila envelope still sealed with the same brittle tape. I did not open it. I did not need to. I knew what was inside. But when I slid the guardianship form free, searching for the signature line to steady myself, a third name caught the fluorescent light. It was written in a hurried scrawl beneath Darlene's looping cursive, and Ray's block letters almost lost in the crease where the paper had been folded for decades. The ink had bled slightly, but the letters were unmistakable Caleb Pike. Among the papers, Grace spots a faded signature, not her mother's, not her father's, but a stranger's Caleb Pike. Caleb. The name Caleb Pike stared up at me from the yellowed crease like an accusation written in disappearing ink. I stood frozen in the church office, the NICU folder trembling in my grip, the clamor of the fellowship hall muffled to a heartbeat behind the door. Ruth's knock came soft but urgent. I slid the guardianship form back into its sleeve, locked the safe, and opened the door just enough to whisper, "I need to go home." She read my face, nodded once, and within minutes we were in her sedan, rolling past the corn stubble toward the farmhouse I still called Mabel's, even though the deed had borne my name for 25 years. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and old paper. I set the fireproof safe on the oak table where Mabel used to grade spelling tests, spun the combination, and lifted out the manila envelope that had waited since 1970. My 18th birthday had fallen on a Thursday in April 1988. I remembered because the lilacs were blooming and the senior prom committee had begged me to chaperone. Mabel baked a lopsided chocolate cake with lumpy frosting, set 2 mismatched forks beside paper plates, and pushed the envelope across the oilcloth with the same gravity she once reserved for report cards. "Your parents left this for when you were grown," she said. I never opened it. "Choice is yours, Gracie girl." I was 18, invincible in the way only teenagers can be certain that knowledge would cauterize any wound. I slit the tape with the paring knife we used for apples, and the contents slid out like contraband: 1 sheet of dime store stationery folded twice, 1 Polaroid, 1 business card, and a single legal-sized document folded to fit. The letter first. Darlene's looping cursive, the ink faded to rust. "We never meant for things to turn out this way. Life got too big. Please understand, we loved you the best we could." Ray's block letters underneath, "Stay strong, kid." The apology felt rehearsed, like lines memorized for a play they never intended to finish. I set it aside without flinching. Tears would come later in private. The photograph stopped my breath. Darlene, 23, exhausted hair scraped into a ponytail, stood in a hospital corridor beneath harsh fluorescence. She cradled a red-faced infant swaddled in a blanket printed with tiny yellow ducks. Me. The gold bracelet with its heart charm glinted on her left wrist, the same bracelet now flashing on the woman laughing too loudly in the fellowship hall. Someone had written on the white border in blue ballpoint, "Property of C. Pike, return if found." The handwriting did not match either parent's. The business card was crisp, corners sharp. Helen Rowe, RN, Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, County General Hospital, with a local exchange still in service. I turned it over. On the back, in the same blue ink, a phone number and the words, "Call if you ever need the truth." Mabel watched me, eyes soft. "That nurse sat with me the first night," she said. "Held my hand when the doctor said you might not see morning." Last came the notarized agreement. Heavy stock embossed seal cracked along one edge. It read like a contract between strangers. "I, Darlene Marie Carter, do hereby grant temporary medical decision-making authority to Mabel Louise Carter for the minor child. Grace Elizabeth Carter, effective this 12th day of February 1970, for a period not to exceed 30 days. Darlene's signature sprawled across the line, Ray's beneath in his blocky scrawl. But at the bottom beneath the notary block, a third signature, Caleb Pike Notary Public Commission, number 4472, slashed across the page in hurried ink. The seal was genuine, but the date beneath it read February 15, 1970, 3 days after the form was signed. Someone had backdated it. A thin, white scratch ran through the commission number where correction fluid had been scraped away and re-inked. Even at 18, I recognized tampering. I had watched enough Perry Mason with Mabel to know evidence when I saw it. I laid the documents in a row like tarot cards. Mabel poured coffee we didn't drink. "What does it mean?" I asked. She tapped the altered seal. "Means somebody wanted this to look legal when it wasn't. Means somebody else made sure it stayed buried." She didn't speculate further. Speculation was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she fetched an empty shoebox, lined it with acid-free tissue, and labeled it 1988. Envelope in her neat teacher script. "Start your own file, Gracie. Whatever comes next, you'll have the original." That night, I bought my first fireproof safe with babysitting money, a small gray Sentry that fit beneath my bed. I photocopied every page at the library, kept the originals locked, the copies in a binder labeled personal. When I left for college, I added dorm receipts, scholarship letters, the sympathy card from David's mother when Mabel's heart finally gave out. After graduation, I archived lesson plans, performance reviews, the mortgage papers on the farmhouse. Marriage brought joint tax returns. David's VA benefits summary, the funeral program when cancer took him too soon. Every document went into the growing row of banker's boxes in the spare room, labeled by year, cross-referenced by category. I told myself it was organization. The truth was armor. If anyone ever tried to rewrite my story, I would have the receipts to prove them liars. The habit became second nature. I photographed every flat tire before calling roadside assistance, initialed every substitute contract, saved the voicemail from the principal praising my Gatsby unit. When the school board questioned my tenure, I produced 32 years of evaluations in chronological order. When the insurance company denied David's final claim, I mailed them a timeline with highlighted dates and watched the check arrive within days. Evidence, Mabel taught me, was power. Evidence meant no one could take what was mine without a fight. Years collapsed into decades. The safe outgrew its corner. I installed a gun-style cabinet in the closet combination known only to me and Ruth. I taught my students to keep records, permission slips, doctor's notes, college acceptance letters, because the world rewarded the prepared. I never spoke of the envelope aloud. It lived in the 1988 box untouched except for annual inventory. Until today. Back in the present, the church fellowship hall still buzzed beyond the office door, but I was 18 again, holding that altered notary seal under the kitchen's single bulb. I locked the safe, slid it into my tote, and returned to the potluck with Ruth at my side. Darlene and Ray had migrated to the dessert table, piling plates high, charming the widows with tales of hard luck. I accepted a cup of punch from David, kissed his cheek, and let Ray pull me into a conversation about the weather. He smelled of motor oil and bravado. "Remember that big snow in '71?" he asked, mouthful of lemon bar. "Buried the trailer up to the windows. You were just a toddler, cute as a button." Darlene nodded vigorously, eyes bright. I smiled the way I smiled at parents who swore their child never missed an assignment. The Polaroid in the envelope was date-stamped February 12th, 1970. I was 4 months old, still in the hospital, still on oxygen. There was no toddler, no trailer, no snowed-in windows. The timeline didn't match. In a conversation, Ray mentions a date that doesn't match the timeline of the abandonment photo. Ray's casual lie about a snowed-in trailer in '71 hung in the fellowship hall, air like cheap perfume, but I let it settle without comment. I had learned long ago that the first rule of evidence is to gather it quietly. The second is to never tip your hand until the jury is seated. I excused myself with a smile that felt carved from wood, promised David I would be right back, and slipped out the side door into the crisp October dusk. Ruth followed, keys already in hand. "Drive me home," I said. "I need to think." She didn't ask questions. She simply turned the sedan toward the county road and let the silence stretch until the church lights disappeared in the rearview mirror. The farmhouse welcomed me with the familiar creak of the screen door and the faint scent of lemon oil Mabel used on the banister every Sunday. I hung my coat, set the kettle on, and climbed the stairs to the spare room that had become my archive. Banker's boxes lined the walls like soldiers, each labeled in my own neat block print 1988-992, college 1993-2000, teaching contracts 2001-2010, marriage and medical. I pulled the 2015 box, the one I rarely opened, and carried it downstairs to the kitchen table. Inside lay the letter that changed everything, written in Earl Carter's spidery hand on lined paper torn from a legal pad. Earl was Mabel's older brother, a man I called Grandpa, though the blood tie was thin. He had farmed 300 acres of river bottom, never married, never wasted a dime. Folks thought him eccentric because he paid cash for everything and kept his money in mason jars buried under the smokehouse. The truth was simpler. He trusted banks about as much as he trusted weather forecasts. When he died at 91, the county clerk called me to the courthouse expecting a pauper's estate. Instead, I presented a will drafted in 1985 by a lawyer in the state capitol, airtight and notarized. Earl left the land, the equipment, the mineral rights, and every buried jar to my grandniece, Grace Elizabeth Carter, to be hers alone, free and clear, on condition she outlive me. The no contest clause was ironclad. Any challenger forfeited all claim forever. The probate judge stamped it approved in under 10 minutes. The farm sold for more than anyone imagined. Oil leases timber a cell tower on the back 40. After taxes and fees, the trust held just over $3 million. I kept the farmhouse, paid off the mortgage, and invested the rest in municipal bonds and a quiet index fund. I told no one the exact figure, not even David. Money, like grief, is best handled in measured doses. I built the rest of my life the same way, brick by deliberate brick. College at the State University on scholarships and night shift waitressing degree in English with a minor in history, because stories and facts both matter. I student taught under Mrs. Langford, who drilled punctuation into sophomores the way drill sergeants drill marching. My first contract at Willow Creek High paid $18,400 a year. I framed the offer letter and hung it above my desk as a reminder that beginnings are humble. I coached debate, advised the yearbook, chaperoned proms, and sensible pumps. Every spring I nominated a senior for the Mabel Carter Memorial Scholarship, $500, toward books, no essay required, just proof of acceptance and a promise to write one thank you note. The kids called it the quiet money, and I liked that. David entered my life in 2001, a widower himself, teaching industrial arts in the next county. We met at a regional curriculum conference when he fixed the projector I had accidentally unplugged. He proposed 2 years later with a ring he'd made from a silver dollar melted in his shop furnace. We married in the farmhouse backyard under the Maple 50 guests potluck reception, my dress from a consignment shop in the city. He moved into my bedroom, hung his tools in the barn, and never once asked about the locked cabinet in the closet. When the cancer came, pancreas stage 4, 6 months from diagnosis to hospice, he held my hand and said, "You've kept every receipt, Gracie. Keep the good ones closest." I did. His funeral program went into the 2010 box beside the hospital bracelet they cut off his wrist the night he died. Widowhood at 45 could have flattened me, but I had practiced standing back up. I returned to the classroom the Monday after the burial, taught the scarlet letter to juniors who didn't yet know what stigma felt like. I expanded the scholarship to 2 recipients, then 3. I endowed a small fund at County General for NICU families, formula parking passes, prepaid phone cards, so no parent had to choose between gas money and a call home. The hospital named a rocking chair in the family lounge after Mabel. I sat in it once just to feel the wood warm beneath me. Every August, I drove to the cemetery with supermarket roses and a fresh manila folder. I updated Earl's file the way accountants update ledgers, investment statements, property tax receipts, charitable contribution letters. I added a new subsection labeled Community Impact. Photos of scholarship winners in caps and gowns. Thank you notes scrawled in teenage handwriting. A brass plaque from the hospital. The ritual grounded me. It said, "This is what you do with what you're given. You pay it forward one documented dollar at a time." The morning the sheriff's deputy knocked, I was grading essays on symbolism in a senior thesis about the Great Gatsby. He stood on the porch and pressed khakis hat in hand, the way deputies do when the news is official. "Ma'am, process server couldn't locate you at the school, so I'm authorized to deliver." He handed over a thick envelope stamped "Urgent Court Documents." Inside was a petition filed in county court. Darlene Marie Carter and Raymond Joseph Carter. Plaintiffs versus Grace Elizabeth Carter, defendant. They claimed Earl's will was invalid due to undue influence, lack of capacity, and most audacious fraudulent adoption. They wanted the entire estate declared community property and divided equally among lawful heirs. The hearing was set for 30 days out. I closed the door, leaned against it, and felt the old familiar calm settle over me like a blanket. The no contest clause gleamed in my mind, bright as the notary seal on Earl's will. I carried the summons to the kitchen table, opened the 2015 box, and slid the papers into a fresh sleeve labeled Legal 2025. Then I brewed coffee strong and black, and began to outline my response the way I outlined lesson plans. Facts first, emotions. Second, victory. Last. One day, police deliver a summons. Darlene and Ray are suing Grace over the will. The summons lay on this kitchen table like a loaded gun, but I refused to flinch. I spent the next 48 hours preparing the way. I prepared for parent-teacher conferences, color-coded folders, annotated statutes, and a timeline printed on cardstock. I emailed Mara Kincaid, the estate attorney who had handled Earl's probate, attaching the petition and a single line. "They're contesting the will. Need counsel." Her reply came within the hour. "Coffee tomorrow, 8 a.m. My office. Bring every document you have." I smiled at the screen. Mara still believed in paper the way Mabel had. Before I could leave for the meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Mama here. Can we talk just us girls? Lunch tomorrow." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Darlene had never called me girls in any memory I owned. I typed back Daisy's Diner noon. Public place, neutral ground. She responded with a string of heart emojis that felt like counterfeit currency. Daisy's sat on the edge of town where the cornfields gave way to truck stops, its neon sign flickering. Deus, since the Y had burned out in '89. I arrived early, claimed the corner booth beneath the faded John Deere calendar, and ordered iced tea I had no intention of drinking. Darlene swept in at 12:07 wearing the same leopard jacket, now paired with a denim skirt and boots that had seen better highways. She carried a vinyl purse the size of a feed sack and smelled of hairspray and desperation. No Ray this time. Just the two of us and the waitress who refilled coffee with the efficiency of a metronome. Darlene slid into the booth, eyes already glistening. "Grace, honey, I've missed you so much." The tears came on cue, sliding down cheeks powdered too thick. She dabbed at them with a napkin that left beige streaks. "Losing your grandpa hit us hard. Ray's blood pressure, my arthritis doctors say I need a knee replacement. We're drowning, baby girl." She reached across the table, fingers brushing my wrist where David's watch ticked steady seconds. I let her hand rest there, counting heartbeats the way I counted syllables in poetry. The waitress set down menus. Darlene ignored hers. "We just need a little help to get back on our feet. 10,000, maybe 15. For the surgery, the pills, the back rent." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Ray's too proud to ask, but I'm your mother. Blood don't lie." I sipped the tea, sweet and cold. "I'm sorry you're struggling." I said the same tone I used when a student claimed the dog ate their thesis. "There are programs, Medicaid, the county health fund, the church benevolence committee. I can give you the numbers." I slid a folded sheet across the Formica contact names and extensions typed in 12-point font. Darlene's smile faltered. She pushed the paper back. "Charity's fine for strangers, but we're family. You've got Grandpa's money sitting in the bank doing nothing but collecting dust. What's a little between mother and daughter?" She leaned closer, voice syrupy. "We could move into the farmhouse. Save on rent, help each other out. I'll cook clean, be there for you like I should have been. The waitress refilled my glass without asking. I waited until her footsteps faded. The farmhouse is paid for, I said. I live alone, teach full-time, and manage my own bills. I'm not looking for roommates. I kept my hands folded, nails short and clean, the way Mabel taught me when company came. Darlene's tears dried faster than they'd fallen. You'd turn your own mother away. After everything we've been through. She rummaged in her purse tissues, scattering like confetti. I raised you. You didn't, I said quietly. Mabel did, with every dime she earned ironing shirts and selling eggs. I honor her memory by helping others the way she helped me through established channels, not cash envelopes. I placed a 20 under the salt shaker and stood. Take the resource list. Use it or don't. But the answer is no. Darlene's face hardened. She snatched her purse vinyl, cracking like a whip. As she swung it over her shoulder, a single sheet of paper fluttered out, landing face up between the ketchup and the sugar caddy. Legal size, creased from years in a wallet, the edges soft as cloth. I recognized the format before I read the words notary block embossed seal signature line. Caleb Pike's name leapt out in faded blue ink, the same scrawl from the guardianship form, the same cracked seal. The document was a power of attorney dated 1985, granting Darlene authority over an unnamed minor's medical decisions. The minor's name had been whited out and retyped Grace E. Carter. The commission number beneath Pike's signature didn't match the one on the hospital form. Someone had swapped seals like playing cards. Darlene lunged for the paper, but I was faster. I tucked it into my planner beside the resource list. Careless, I said. You should keep better track of your paperwork. Her eyes widened, calculating losses. I left her scrambling for tissues and excuses, the bell above the door jingling like a warning. Outside, the October wind carried the scent of wood smoke and distant rain. I slid into my car, locked the doors, and pulled out my phone. My thumbs flew across the screen. Ruth need everything you can find on Caleb Pike and Elder Von Mercer. Hospital notary, 1970, possible forged docs. Call me tonight. I hit send, started the engine, and watched Darlene burst through the diner door, purse clutched to her chest, scanning the parking lot for a daughter who was already gone. Grace texts Ruth find info on Caleb Pike and Elder Von Mercer. The engine had barely cooled when I pulled into the gravel drive, the diner's neon dais still flickering behind my eyelids. I carried the power of attorney slip like contraband, slid it into a fresh acid-free sleeve, and labeled it 2025. Diner drop. Then I brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead and opened the laptop Ruth had gifted me for Christmas, military-grade encryption, her idea of stocking stuffers. While it booted, I texted Mara new evidence, forged POA, same notary. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a single word, tomorrow. Ruth called at 8:30, voice crisp over the crackle of her ancient landline. Caleb Pike's alive. Barely. Assisted living in Branson revoked notary license, 1987 state board citation for multiple irregularities in estate documents. Guess whose name keeps popping up in the disciplinary file? She didn't wait. Elder Von Mercer. Local developer, pillar of the chamber, Sunday school teacher at First Baptist till the scandal hit. I'm driving down in the morning. Meet me at the county annex at 9. I was there at 8:45, thermos in hand, watching dust motes dance in the fluorescent light of the records room. The clerk, a woman who'd been shelving deeds since Nixon recognized me from PTA bake sales. Microfiche or digital, she asked. I requested both. Earl had banked at Willow Creek Savings and Loan before it merged with a regional chain. The microfiche reels were stored in acid-free boxes labeled by decade. I started with 1970 and worked forward, eyes burning from the glow of the reader pre-new reader. The first transfer appeared in March 1970, $200 from Earl Carter to Darlene M. Carter memo line blank. Another in June. September-December, always $200, always the same account at a bank in Joplin. By 1975, the amount had crept to $300, then $500 by 1980. The payments never stopped even after Darlene supposedly vanished into the sunset. I printed every screen the machine, coughing out thermal paper that smelled of hot plastic. By 1990, the transfers were routed through a trust labeled D.M.C. Minor support signed by one Caleb Pike notary. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before Earl's death, $1,000 memo final disbursement. I sat back, the chair creaking like old bones, and felt the conspiracy take shape. Ruth arrived at noon with a manila folder thick as a phone book. We commandeered a study Carol in the law library, spreading documents like tarot cards. She had pulled the state notary board file Caleb Pike license number 4472, revoked, for falsifying acknowledgments in probate matters at the direction of Elder V. Mercer. Attached were affidavits from 3 widows who claimed Mercer pressured them to sign over mineral rights using Pike's seal. One widow's deed had been altered after her husband's death to list Mercer as co-owner. The board sanctioned Pike fined Mercer $10,000 and quietly let the developer keep his empire. Ruth tapped a grainy newspaper photo Mercer in 1985 younger slicker arm around a smiling Darlene at a chamber ribbon cutting. Lovers, Ruth said. Or business partners. Maybe both. I laid the microfiche printouts beside the disciplinary file and built the timeline on a legal pad. February 12, 1970. Abandonment. Temporary guardianship signed. February 15th. Backdated notary by Pike. March 1970. First payment from Earl. 1971 to 1985. Regular support. 1985 forged power of attorney surfaces at diner. 1987 Pike loses license. The pattern was surgical. Someone had orchestrated Darlene's exit, insured Earl's silence with money, and kept the pipeline open for decades. Mercer's name threaded every knot. Ruth drove us to Branson that afternoon, the Ozarks rolling gold and crimson outside the windows. The assisted living facility smelled of disinfectant and canned peas. Caleb Pike sat in a wheelchair by the window, oxygen tubing taped to his cheek, eyes sharp behind bifocals. He recognized the notary seal I slid across the tray table. Should have burned that years ago, he rasped. Ruth recorded on her phone with his nod. Mercer paid me to make problems disappear. Darlene was his girl wild, pretty useful. When the baby came early and sick, he saw leverage. Told her to sign the kid over, promised Earl would pay to keep it quiet. I notarized whatever he handed me. He coughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. Mercer wanted the Carter land. Figured if the girl was tied to Darlene, he could control the old man through guilt. Worked for 15 years. I asked the question, burning since the diner. Was Mercer my father? Caleb's laugh rattled. Lord, no. Darlene had a type roughnecks, not suits. Mercer just owned her for a while. He reached for a tissue knuckles knobby with arthritis. He'll come for the money now. Always does. We left Branson with a signed affidavit and a cassette tape Ruth transferred to digital in the car. I dropped her at the annex to file the notary revocation with Mara, then drove home through dusk thick as velvet. The mailbox held a single envelope, no return address, postmarked Joplin. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. Darlene's looping scrawl. You think you're so smart with Grandpa's money. He was my uncle, too. You stole what was mine. I'll see you in court. Tucked in the fold was a torn scrap of yellow legal paper, Mercer's elegant signature unmistakable. I'll protect the child if you stay silent. Darlene sends a letter accusing Grace of exploiting Earl but encloses a scrap with Mercer's signature. I'll protect the child if you stay silent. The scrap with Mercer's handwriting felt heavier than the envelope itself. I stood in the kitchen under the single bulb, the house quiet except for the tick of Mabel's old wall clock. I slid Darlene's accusation into a fresh sleeve labeled 2025, extortion attempt, then photographed Mercer's note front and back before sealing it in an evidence bag Ruth had left from a previous case. My phone buzzed Mara Kincaid. Office, 7 a.m. Bring everything. I brewed a thermos, pulled on yesterday's slacks, and was backing out of the drive before the roosters stirred. Mara's firm occupied the second floor of the old opera house downtown, brass nameplate polished to a gleam. She met me at the door in running shoes and a charcoal suit, hair still damp from a sunrise jog. At 48, she looked 35, moved like a prosecutor, and billed like a surgeon. We had met when Earl's probate hit a snag over a forgotten mineral deed. She untangled it in 48 hours and sent me a bill with a smiley face sticker. I trusted her the way I trusted gravity. She led me to a conference room lined with bankers' boxes already labeled Carter, Vai Carter. A whiteboard dominated one wall timeline sketched in dry erase precision. "Sit," she said, pouring coffee into mugs that read, "World's okayest lawyer. We're building a fortress. Start with the will." I handed over Earl's original, the probate order, the trust agreement, and the diner power of attorney. She flipped pages like a card shark, eyes narrowing at the no contest clause. "Ironclad," she murmured. "They'll try to crack it with fraud or incapacity. We'll bury them in originals." Mara's demands came fast and surgical. She wanted every asset statement since Earl's death, brokerage accounts, farm sale proceeds, the NICU endowment fund. She wanted the hospital microfiche, the 1970 guardianship form, the altered notary seal. "Trace the 1970s clauses," she said. "Temporary guardianship expires in 30 days, unless extended by court order. Find the extension or prove it never existed." She tapped the whiteboard where she had written statute of limitations in red. "If Darlene abandoned parental rights, she can't resurrect them now without proving fraud on our side. We'll prove fraud on theirs." I spent the next week in a blur of scanners and subpoenas. I delivered the NICU files in a wheeled crate, the banker's boxes from the farmhouse spare room, the microfiche printouts Ruth had pulled. Mara's paralegal photographed every page, uploaded to a secure server, and cross-referenced dates in a spreadsheet that grew like kudzu. I signed retainer agreements, authorized fees, and watched my savings dip without regret. Evidence cost money. Freedom cost more. Ruth worked the human angle. She tracked Helen Rowe through nursing alumni directories and a retired doctor Facebook group. Helen had moved to Florida after County General closed its NICU in 1995, widowed, living in a pastel condo near Clearwater. Ruth flew down on a Tuesday rental car smelling of coconut air freshener. She found Helen on the balcony shelling peas, hair white as printer paper, eyes still sharp. Ruth recorded the interview on her phone with permission. Helen remembered the night clearly, Darlene pacing the corridor in leopard print, Ray chain-smoking in the parking lot. The man in the expensive coat who arrived after midnight. Tall, silver at the temples, carried a leather briefcase, Helen said. Introduced himself as a family friend. Paid the outstanding balance in cash, $3,000, mostly 20s. Told the charge nurse to release the baby to Mrs. Mabel Carter and forget the parents were ever here. Helen had initialed the discharge summary. The carbon copy was in my 1970 box. Ruth emailed the audio file with a single line. Mercer was there. I forwarded it to Mara, who added it to the whiteboard under witnesses. She drew an arrow from Mercer to Darlene labeled cash payment and another to me labeled attempted erasure. The fortress grew brick by brick. We met nightly in Mara's conference room, takeout containers piling up like battlements. She taught me legal chess file motions to compel discovery, depose Darlene under oath. Subpoena Mercer's bank records for the years Pike notarized his deals. She drafted interrogatories that read like poetry. State every address resided in since 1970. List every financial transaction with Elder Von Mercer. Mara's eyes gleamed when she said, "They'll either answer or perjure. Either way, we win." Ruth flew back bronzed and triumphant, Helen's signed affidavit in her carry-on. We celebrated with grocery store cake and decaf in my kitchen, the whiteboard's reflection glowing on the window. I felt the old calm settle, the same calm that carried me through David's funeral, through every parent who swore their child never cheated. Preparation was prayer in actionable form. Then the email came at 2:14 a.m. Subject line: Urgent counterclaim filed. Mara never slept. I opened it on my phone, the screen's glow harsh against the dark bedroom. They're countersuing you for impersonating a child to steal the estate. Attached was a 20-page pleading alleging I was not Earl's biological heir, that Mabel had falsified adoption papers, that the entire inheritance was procured by fraud. Darlene and Ray sought treble damages attorney fees, and immediate freeze of all trust assets. The hearing was advanced to next week. I forwarded the email to Ruth with one line, "War just escalated." Then I opened the gun safe, pulled the 1970 NICU folder, and began photographing every page under the desk lamp. The fortress would hold, but now it needed a moat. Mara emails urgently, "They're countersuing you for impersonating a child to steal the estate." The email from Mara sat open on my phone like a live wire, its subject line glowing red in the dark bedroom. I slipped on my robe, padded downstairs, and fired up the scanner under the kitchen's single bulb. Every page of the 1970 NICU file slid through the feeder with a soft mechanical sigh. Discharge summary. Oxygen logs. Mabel's emergency consent until the machine spat out a stack of crisp copies. I labeled the originals, counterclaim exhibit A through Z. Then emailed the scans to Mara with a note. More ammo. Sleep optional. Her reply pinged back before I reached the coffee maker. Good. Bring originals to office 7 a.m. We're filing sanctions. The next morning, while Mara shredded the counterclaim in legalese, I drove to the post office to retrieve the certified mail Ruth had flagged. The clerk handed over a thick envelope postmarked from a women's crisis center in Tulsa, addressed to me in Darlene's looping cursive. Inside was a single sheet of lavender stationery, the kind sold in dollar store packs, and a photocopy of a letter dated 1982. The original, Darlene claimed, had been sent to the organization begging for shelter. She wanted me to see the truth before court. I read it in the parking lot, engine ticking as it cooled. The letter was a masterpiece of selective memory. Darlene wrote that she fled Ray's dangerous associates in the dead of night, leaving her infant daughter in the hospital to protect her from gang violence. She claimed she pawned her only valuable possession, a gold bracelet with a heart charm, to buy bus tickets south. She begged the shelter for a safe room and a job, promising to return for her child once the threat was gone. The photocopy bore a stamped, received date and a caseworker's initials. Darlene's covering note was shorter. See, I never wanted to leave you. Ray forced my hand. I folded the pages with the care I reserved for antique maps. The bracelet story was the first crack. I had seen that bracelet on Darlene's wrist at the church potluck, glinting under fluorescent lights, not melted down in some pawn shop vault. I opened my planner to the diner photo I'd snapped when she wasn't looking. Bracelet, front and center clasp intact, no solder marks. Lie number 1. The second crack was subtler. The letter mentioned a second child, a little girl left with a neighbor because the shelter wouldn't take two. The name was smudged as if erased and rewritten, but the indentation in the paper read clear under the truck's dome light. Lily. No last name, no age, just Lily. My pulse skipped. Darlene had never breathed a word about another daughter in any conversation, any pleading text, any tearful diner monologue. The crisis center's stamp looked authentic, but the paper felt wrong, too bright, too smooth for 1982 stock. I slipped both letters into a fresh evidence sleeve labeled 2025, fabrication, and drove to Mara's office. Mara took one look and sent the photocopy to her forensic document examiner with a post-it age the paper. Test ink. Rush. While we waited, Ruth cross-referenced the shelter's old address. It had closed in 1985, records destroyed in a flood. Convenient. The examiner's report landed by email that afternoon, paper manufactured 2018 ink pigment post-2005. The letter was a modern forgery printed on faux vintage stationery. Darlene had built her sob story on lies stacked like Jenga blocks. I spent the evening at the kitchen table, legal pad open, reconstructing Darlene's narrative against my own timeline. If she fled a gang in 1970, why did Earl's payments continue for 20 years? If she pawned the bracelet, why was it on her wrist last week? And who was Lily? The name tugged like a loose thread. I searched county birth records online. Nothing under Carter. I tried marriage indexes, property deeds, even old phone directories Ruth had scanned. Lily Carter produced 0 hits, yet the smudged indentation felt deliberate, a breadcrumb dropped to be found. The call came at 9:47 p.m., just as I clicked off the desk lamp. Unknown number, local exchange. I answered on the 3rd ring. Grace Carter speaking. A woman's voice, hesitant, younger than mine, but not by much. This is Lily Carter. I think I'm your sister. The kitchen light flickered once as if Mabel herself leaned in to listen. Darlene gave me your number. Lily continued. She said you'd want to know the truth before everything blows up in court. Her words trembled like leaves in wind. Can we meet? Please, Grace gets a call. I'm Lily Carter. I think I'm your sister. Lily's voice trembled through the phone like a wire pulled too tight, and the kitchen clock kept ticking as if nothing had changed. I pressed the receiver closer, the plastic warm against my ear. Where are you? I asked. She named a coffee shop on the edge of town, the one with the cracked vinyl booths and burnt coffee that tasted like regret. Give me 20 minutes, I said, and hung up before doubt could creep in. I arrived to find her in the corner booth, knees drawn up, nursing a mug that had gone cold. She was 30-something, maybe 35, with Darlene's high cheekbones, but none of her hardness. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot, and she wore a waitress uniform under a denim jacket 2 sizes too big. When she looked up, her eyes were the same hazel as mine, the color Mabel used to call Riverstone. She stood uncertain, and we hugged like strangers who had practiced the motion in dreams. She smelled of fryer grease and cheap shampoo. We ordered refills neither of us wanted. Lily spoke first, words tumbling out in a rush. She had grown up in a string of trailers from Joplin to Tulsa, moving whenever the rent came due. Darlene waitressed nights, Ray fixed cars when he was sober, and Lily learned early to count change and hide the good snacks when company came. Darlene never mentioned another daughter, not once. She said you died, Lily whispered, twisting a napkin into knots. When you were a baby. Some lung thing. She kept a little brass urn on the shelf, said it was your ashes. I believed her till I was 12. I let her talk the way I let students talk when they finally admitted cheating on a test. She described Darlene's moods, sugar-sweet 1 minute, screaming the next, always with a story about the man who got away. Ray came and went, bringing bruises and promises. Lily dropped out at 16 to work doubles at the diner, sent money home when Darlene's knees gave out. She saw my name on paperwork once when she was 15, helping Darlene fill out a rental application. Grace E. Carter, she said. Same middle initial as mine. I thought it was a coincidence. Darlene snatched the form away, said it was an old friend's kid. The scars came up over pie we didn't eat. Lily rolled up her sleeve to show a faint crescent on her inner forearm, pale against summer skin. Hospital test, she said. I was 4. Some study for premature babies. They paid Mama $500. Hurt like fire, but she bought me a bike. I pushed up my own sleeve without thinking. The mark was identical, same arm, same shape, same faded white. Lily's eyes widened. You too. I nodded, the memory surfacing like a stone from deep water. I had been 3, maybe 4, a clinic in Springfield, fluorescent lights, and a nurse with cold hands. Mabel thought it was a free checkup. Darlene had signed the consent. The money bought groceries for a month. I had forgotten until Lily's scar stared back at me. Mercer. I said the name bitter on my tongue. He ran trials through shell companies, paid parents to enroll sick kids. Darlene needed cash. We were the price. Lily's face crumpled. She told me you were dead so I wouldn't ask questions. Said the money was for medicine that didn't work. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. I Googled you after she gave me your number. Found your teacher page, the scholarship fund. You're real. You're here. She reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted to know I wasn't crazy. I believed her. The earnestness in her voice was something Darlene had never mastered. I slid a business card across the table, my personal cell, not the school line. You need a safe place, you call. No strings. I meant it. I had spent a lifetime refusing to repeat Mabel's sacrifices, but I would not repeat Darlene's abandonment either. I paid the bill, left a tip big enough to cover Lily's next break, and walked her to her car. She hugged me again, longer this time, and I felt the years we had lost settle between us like a third presence. That night, I added a new folder to the archive, 2025. Lily. I printed the coffee shop receipt, photographed our scars side by side on the kitchen table, and wrote a timeline of her childhood against mine. The overlaps were chilling, same towns, same clinics, same forged initials on consent forms. Mercer's shadow stretched further than I thought. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. A photo message from Lily. The image showed a rental contract, yellowed and creased tenant name typed in faded ink. Grace Elizabeth Carter. The signature beneath was not mine, not Darlene's looping scrawl, but a precise, elegant hand that matched the scrap from Darlene's extortion letter. Mercer's handwriting clear as a confession. Lily sends a rental contract photo, tenant named Grace, birth name signature forged, resembling Mercer's handwriting. The rental contract photo glowed on my phone screen long after midnight, Mercer's forged signature looping across the line like a noose tightening. I forwarded it to Mara with a single line, new forgery, same hand. Then I opened the 2025 Mercer folder on my laptop and added the image beside the diner power of attorney and the extortion scrap. The pattern was unmistakable: 3 documents, 3 decades, 1 man's pen. I brewed coffee strong and black and waited for Ruth's sunrise call. She rang at 6:30, voice crisp over the crackle of interstate static. Caleb Pike's in a rehab facility outside Springfield. Stroke last year, but lucid. I'm 2 hours out. Meet me at the county clerk at 9 to pull adoption indexes. I was already dressed, thermos in hand, the farmhouse door locking behind me with a click that sounded like a starting gun. The clerk's office smelled of old paper and lemon polish. Ruth arrived with a courthouse badge clipped to her blazer, eyes bright from too little sleep. We requested every adoption filing under Carter or Mercer from 1970 to 1990. The clerk returned with a single slim folder, dust motes dancing in the fluorescent light. Inside was a petition dated March 1970. Elder Vaughn Mercer and Darlene Marie Carter, seeking to adopt minor child Grace Elizabeth Carter. The signature line bore Caleb Pike's notary seal, the same cracked embossment from the hospital form. A second page, stapled behind, showed the petition withdrawn, April 2nd, 1970, with a handwritten note. Parents reconciled, case closed. No court order, no hearing, just a rubber stamp and a fee paid in cash. Ruth drove us to the rehab center, a low brick building surrounded by mums gone leggy. Caleb sat in a vinyl recliner, oxygen hissing softly, a quilt tucked around his knees. He recognized Ruth from Branson, managed a crooked smile. She set her phone on the tray table, hit record. Mr. Pike, tell us about the adoption petition. His voice rasped like dry leaves. Mercer wanted the kid. Said the old man Earl had land worth millions. Told Darlene to sign, promised her a cut once the will was rewritten. I filed the papers, backdated the acknowledgement so it looked legit after the hospital release. Mercer paid me $500 cash, said burn the file if anyone asked. He coughed, sipped water through a straw. Darlene chickened out. Said Ray threatened to kill her if she gave the baby away. Mercer withdrew the petition, paid Ray to keep quiet instead. I asked the question burning since the diner. Who signed my name on the rental contract? Caleb's eyes flicked to the photo I slid across the quilt. Mercer. Practiced it for weeks. Wanted lease agreements in the kid's name to build a paper trail, prove dependency force, Earl's hand. He tapped the forged signature. Same ink, same pressure. My seal's on half his deals. Ruth left with a signed affidavit and a promise to return with coffee. I drove to the bank, requested microfiche for Mercer Holdings. The reels were stored in the basement vault, temperature-controlled, labeled by year. I started with 1970 and worked forward. The first transfer appeared in May, $500 from Mercer Holdings to Ray Carter Memo Consulting. Another in August-November, always $500, always the same account in Ray's name at a Joplin credit union. By 1980, the amount doubled, then tripled by 1990. The final entry was dated 2 months ago. $25,000, memo legal retainer. I printed every screen, the thermal paper curling in my fist. Mara met me at the courthouse with a subpoena for Mercer's corporate records. We served it at his office downtown, a glass and steel monument to strip malls and storage units. His secretary tried to stall. Mara smiled the way sharks smile. Tell Mr. Mercer the judge signed at 2:17 p.m. Clocks ticking. We left with a promise of compliance by morning. That evening, Ruth forwarded a video file from Helen Rowe filmed on her condo balcony with the Gulf sparkling behind her. Helen wore a sun hat and a voice steady as granite. February 12, 1970. 11:47 p.m. Darlene Carter signed the temporary guardianship, told me she was leaving town. At 12:03 a.m., a man in a camel coat arrived, paid the $214.60 balance in cash. Hundreds and fifties counted twice. He instructed me to release the infant to Mabel Carter and mark the parents as location unknown. Darlene left with him carrying a leather satchel thick as a phone book. She was not destitute. Helen held up the original cash receipt, yellowed but legible. Mercer's initials scrawled in the corner. I watched the video 3 times, then emailed it to Mara with the bank printouts and Caleb's affidavit. The fortress was nearly complete, forged adoptions, hush money, cash payoffs, all leading to one man. I archived every file labeled the new folder 2025, Mercer Conspiracy, and went to bed with the lights on. My phone buzzed at 1:14 a.m. Ruth's name on the screen. The text was short, lethal. Mercer is funding their entire lawsuit. Bank records just came in $150K wire to their attorney last week. We've got him. Ruth texts, Mercer is funding their entire lawsuit. Ruth's text burned a hole in my phone until dawn, the words Mercer is funding their entire lawsuit looping like a siren. I forwarded it to Mara with a single instruction. Subpoena his accounts, freeze the retainer. She replied before I reached the coffee maker. Done. Mediation scheduled 9 a.m. tomorrow, courthouse annex. Bring your humanity, leave your checkbook. The mediation room smelled of industrial carpet and stale hope, fluorescent lights humming over a mahogany table scarred by decades of bad bargains. The neutral arbitrator, a retired judge named Hargrove, sat at the head in a cardigan the color of dishwater. Mara flanked me on the left, briefcase open like a shield. Darlene and Ray arrived late, escorted by their attorney, a slick young partner from a Kansas City firm who introduced himself as representing the plaintiff's interests. Mercer followed uninvited, taking the last chair against the wall. Legs crossed a gold Rolex, catching the light every time he checked the time. Ruth slipped in behind him, notepad ready, eyes sharp. Hargrove opened with the standard script, voluntary, confidential, no prejudice. Darlene launched, first voice trembling with rehearsed grief. We just want what's fair, she said, dabbing dry eyes with a tissue. Half the estate plus pain and suffering. And Grace owes us an apology, public in the paper, for shutting us out after Grandpa died. Ray nodded, arms folded over his belly. Reputation matters. Folks think we're gold diggers. That hurts. Mara slid a folder across the table. Counteroffer, 0 cash. Grace will fund verified medical expenses through the County Health Trust, knee replacement, blood pressure meds, whatever Medicare denies. Documentation required receipts reimbursed within 30 days. No cohabitation, no press release, no admission of liability. She spoke like a scalpel, clean and precise. Darlene's face hardened. That's charity. We're family. She leaned forward, leopard jacket straining. Move us into the farmhouse, Grace. We'll take care of you when you're old. 10,000 a month for life, and we call it square. Ray grunted agreement. Blood don't come cheap. I kept my hands folded, nails short and clean. The farmhouse is my home. I said, voice level, the same tone I used when a student begged for a grade change. I manage my own care. The medical trust is generous, more than most children offer estranged parents. Take it, or we proceed to trial. I slid the trust brochure across the table, glossy pages detailing covered procedures. Darlene pushed it back like it burned. Ray leaned in, breath sour with coffee and contempt. Don't forget, you're our daughter too. DNA don't lie. He smirked, the same smirk from the church potluck when he lied about the snowed-in trailer. Mercer checked his watch again, the Rolex ticking loud in the silence. Ruth's pen scratched across her notepad. She had spotted the watch before, same model, same scratch on the crystal, in a 1985 photo from the chamber banquet where Mercer stood beside Darlene. She circled the detail, underlined it twice. Deeper ties, her note read. I nodded almost imperceptibly. Hargrove tried once more. Compromised Darlene demanded $1 million up front. Mara countered with the trust and a one-time $5,000 emergency grant. Ray called it chump change. Mercer said nothing, but his silence filled the room like smoke. At 10:47, the arbitrator declared impasse. See you in court, he said, closing his folder with a snap. We filed out into the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Darlene cornered me by the vending machines. You'll regret this, she hissed. We know things. Ray loomed behind her, cracking his knuckles. Mercer brushed past the Rolex, glinting, and disappeared into an elevator without a word. Ruth caught my eye, mouthed. He's scared. Back at the farmhouse, I brewed tea I didn't drink and opened the mail stack I'd ignored for days. A plain white envelope from a lab in St. Louis sat on top, return address printed in block letters. I had ordered the kit weeks ago after Lily's call swabs from my cheek raised coffee cup from the diner mailed anonymously. The seal broke with a soft rip. The report was 2 pages. Probability of paternity. Ray Carter to Grace Carter. My 0%. A second sheet listed the true contributor's profile marked unknown male. I stared until the numbers blurred. Ray's sneer echoed in my head, DNA. Don't lie. Turns out it did, just not the way he thought. Grace opens an envelope. DNA results. Ray isn't her biological father. The DNA report lay open on the kitchen table like a verdict already rendered, the 0% paternity probability staring back in cold black ink. I folded it, once slid it into the 2025 biological evidence sleeve, and locked the gun safe with a click that echoed through the quiet house. Sleep never came. Instead, I reviewed Mara's trial binder until the words blurred every exhibit, tabbed every objection anticipated. At 5:47 a.m., I showered, dressed in the navy suit I wore for parent conferences, and drove to the courthouse under a sky the color of wet slate. The county courthouse had stood since 1903, limestone steps worn smooth by a century of justice and injustice. I climbed them at 8:15, heels steady, briefcase heavy with originals. The courtroom itself was smaller than television, promised oak pews polished to a sheen. A single ceiling fan turning lazily, the flag drooping in still air. Spectators filled half the benches. Mrs. Henderson from the church, the principal who once threatened to cut my budget, a reporter from the weekly paper scribbling in shorthand. Ruth sat front row left, legal pad balanced on her knee, eyes scanning for Mercer. He had not yet appeared. Darlene and Ray occupied the plaintiff's table, back stiff faces pale under fluorescent glare. Darlene wore a floral dress 2 sizes too small, the bracelet glinting on her wrist like a dare. She stared at the tabletop as I passed, refusing to meet my gaze, fingers twisting a tissue into knots. Ray's suit jacket strained at the shoulders. He shot me a smirk that died when Mara laid the first exhibit on the rail. Their attorney, the Kansas City hotshot, shuffled papers and avoided eye contact with the judge. Judge Hargrove, yes, the same mediator, now robed and gavel in hand, called the room to order with a voice honed by decades of cattle auctions. Carter versus Carter contest of probate. Plaintiffs claim undue influence and fraudulent adoption. Defendant moves for summary dismissal under the no contest clause. Counsel proceed. Mara rose smooth as a conductor lifting the baton. She began with the will itself. Earl's original, witnessed by two neighbors, long dead, notarized by a lawyer whose commission had never been questioned. She projected the probate order on the screen, the judge's stamp bold and final. No amendments, no codicils, no evidence of incapacity. She said, voice calm, lethal. Darlene's attorney objected speculation. Overruled. Next came the hospital records. Mara wheeled in the crate I had delivered at dawn, lifted the 1970 NICU binder like a relic. She displayed the guardianship form, the discharge summary, the itemized bill paid in cash. Plaintiff Darlene Carter signed temporary delegation of parental rights on February 12, 1970, and never sought reinstatement. Abandonment is statutory. She clicked to Helen Rowe's video deposition, the retired nurse, crisp on screen, recounting the midnight cash payment, the leather satchel, the instructions to erase the parents from the file. Darlene's head snapped up at the sound of Helen's voice, then dropped again. Ray shifted, whispering to his lawyer. The attorney stood. Objection hears relevance to undue influence. Mara smiled. Directly refutes plaintiff's claim of familial duty. They forfeited that duty 55 years ago. Sustained. I sat with hands folded, breathing measured the way I breathed through David's final nights. Anger would come later in private. For now, I was the eye of the storm, watching Darlene's tissues shred to confetti, watching Ray's smirk fade to a scowl. Mara laid out the microfiche transfers, Earl's payments continuing long after abandonment routed through Mercer Holdings. She stopped short of naming Mercer aloud. That card was still in her sleeve. The judge leaned forward, peering over bifocals. Counsel approach. They conferred in whispers. Darlene's attorney requested a recess. Denied. Mara returned to the lectern, voice steady. The defense rests its case in chief. We reserve the right to call rebuttal witnesses. She sat the binder closing with a soft thud that sounded like a door locking. The plaintiff's case began to crumble under cross-examination. Darlene took the stand, voice quavering, claiming Earl promised her half the farm in exchange for silence about my real parentage. Mara impeached her with the forged crisis center letter, the modern paper, the pawned bracelet lie. Ray followed, sweating through his shirt, insisting he had raised me in his heart. Mara produced the DNA report, 0% match. The courtroom gasped. Darlene's tissue hit the floor. I never raised my voice, never glared, never gave them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. I simply waited the way Mabel waited for spring planting patient, and certain the ground would yield. The judge called for closing arguments. Darlene's attorney stammered through a plea for equity. Mara stood, opened her mouth to deliver the kill shot, and paused. She turned to the bench, smile small but sharp. Your Honor, before we close, the defense calls a rebuttal witness. The bailiff's voice rang clear, Mr. Caleb Pike. Mara rises. We call witness Mr. Caleb Pike. The bailiff's voice still echoed when the side door creaked open and Caleb Pike rolled in, pushed by a nurse in pastel scrubs. The wheelchair squeaked across the oak floor oxygen tank, clinking against the armrest. His face was parchment-thin eyes sharp behind bifocals, the same eyes that had watched me from the Bransonacker in Branson. He raised a trembling hand to swear, voice rasping but steady. Mara approached with the gentleness she reserved for wounded birds. Mr. Pike, state your occupation in 1970. Notary Public Commission, 4472. Describe your relationship with Elder Von Mercer. He paid me to make papers disappear. Or appear. Whatever he needed. Mara laid the adoption petition on the rail March 1970, Mercer and Darlene, seeking custody of minor child Grace Elizabeth Carter. Caleb's seal glowed under the projector. Did you notarize this? I did. Mercer wanted the girl under his roof so Earl would rewrite the will. Said blood didn't matter, control did. And when Darlene refused, Mercer withdrew the petition, paid Ray to stay quiet. I forged the withdrawal stamp. Same ink, same pressure. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Darlene's tissue hit the floor again. Ray's face went the color of old cheese. Mercer sat motionless against the wall, Rolex ticking like a bomb. Mara turned to Ruth, who rose with a banker's box labeled Mercer Holdings 1970 to 1990. She opened it like a magician revealing doves. Microfiche printouts cascaded onto the evidence table, monthly transfers to Ray Carter memo lines, blank or coded consulting legal support. The earliest May 1970, $500. The latest 2 weeks ago, $25,000. Ruth clicked the remote. A spreadsheet filled the screen, red arrows linking every payment to Mercer's corporate account. Total $487,300 over 55 years, she said. All traceable. All undocumented income for Mr. Carter. Ray lunged halfway out of his chair. Objection, I earned that money. Judge Hargrove's gavel cracked. Sit. Ray sat. Mara faced Mercer directly. Mr. Mercer, care to explain why you funded an abandoned child's silence for half a century? Mercer stood suit immaculate, voice smooth as oil. I have no obligation to answer. You do if you wish to avoid perjury, Mara said. The court compels. Mercer's composure cracked. He stepped into the well. Rolex flashing. Fine. I saved Grace from Ray. He was a drunk, a gambler, a danger. I paid to keep her safe. Safe under your control, Mara countered. So you could pressure Earl into naming you heir. Earl was stubborn, Mercer snapped. The land, the oil the tower leases, he hoarded it all. I offered partnership. He refused. Ruth projected the will's final page, a clause no one had noticed before. Handwritten, initialed by Earl in 1985. In the event, no direct descendants survive, estate reverts to nearest blood kin, excluding any party who attempts contest or coercion. Mercer's face drained. You're Earl's cousin, Ruth said. Third removed. You knew this clause existed. You tried adoption, failed, then paid Ray to keep the bloodline muddy. Mercer's voice rose frantic. I saved Grace from Ray, but only to claim the fortune. It was owed me. The courtroom froze. Darlene sobbed aloud. Ray stared at his shoes. Mara let the silence stretch, then turned to the bench. Your Honor, the no contest clause is triggered. Plaintiffs forfeit all claim. Judge Hargrove nodded once. So noted. Mercer spun toward Darlene, finger jabbing. You knew everything, but chose money over your daughter. His voice cracked on the last word, raw, with decades of calculation finally exposed. Mercer in chaos. Darlene knew everything, but chose money over her daughter. Mercer's accusation hung in the courtroom air like smoke after a gunshot, thick and choking. Darlene's sobs turned to hiccups. She clutched the table edge as if it might keep her from drowning. Judge Hargrove's gavel cracked once sharp as a starter pistol. Order. Mr. Mercer, resume your seat or be removed. Mercer ignored him, eyes wild, but two bailiffs stepped forward, hands on belts. Mara lifted a calm palm, no need. She turned to Darlene, voice gentle but unyielding. Mrs. Carter, the court requires clarity. Who is Grace's biological father? Darlene's gaze flicked to me, then away, then back again as though seeing me for the first time. The tissue in her fist was shredded to lint. Sheriff Carter, she whispered. The name fell soft but carried to every corner. Tom Carter. He was stationed in Joplin when I was 22. Ray and I were separated. It was brief. She swallowed hard. When I got pregnant, Ray came back, said he'd raise the baby as his. Tom tried to fight for custody, threatened to arrest Ray for drunk driving for the gambling debts. Ray laughed, said no court would give a badge to a single man over a married couple. Tom backed off, but he never stopped watching. I felt the words settle in my chest, not a blow, but a key turning in a lock I hadn't known was there. Tom Carter had been a fixture in Willow Creek. Tall, quiet, always at the 4th of July parade, in pressed khakis, handing out flags to children. He retired the year I started teaching, moved to a cabin on the lake, sent Christmas cards with photos of trout. I had kept every card in the community box, never guessing the connection. Ruth was already moving. She slid a slim folder across the Rail County Clerk Seal 1970 stamp. Inside was a letter on Sheriff's Department letterhead dated March 15, 1970, addressed to Earl Carter. Ruth read aloud, voice steady. Earl, thank you for taking Grace. Mercer's sniffing around offering Darlene money to sign her over. Ray's no father, he'll sell her to the highest bidder. Keep her safe. I'll handle the rest from here. Burn this after reading. Tom. A second-page carbon copy of a restraining order filed against Ray Carter for harassment signed by Judge Ellis dismissed for lack of service when Ray skipped town. Ruth closed the folder. Sheriff Carter paid child support through Earl anonymous checks postmarked Joplin. Earl logged every one. Lily sat 3 rows behind me. I heard her sharp intake of breath. She stood, voice trembling but clear. Mama told me my dad was a trucker who died in a wreck. But the scars, the clinic visits, same dates, same towns. Grace and I, we're full sisters. Darlene nodded, tears spilling fresh. Tom came back for me 2 later. Said he'd made mistakes. Ray threatened to expose us both if I left. I stayed. The pieces clicked like beads on an abacus. Same father, same mother, same childhood experiments paid for by Mercer's hush money. Lily's hand found mine across the rail. Her fingers were cold, but they held on. I squeezed once steady sister and felt the courtroom tilt towards something like family. Mara addressed the bench. Your Honor, the DNA excludes Ray Carter entirely. Sheriff Tom Carter's paternity is corroborated by contemporaneous documents and plaintiff's admission. The adoption fraud collapses. The no contest clause stands. Judge Hargrove nodded, pen scratching. Motion to dismiss plaintiff's claims granted with prejudice. Costs and sanctions to follow. Mercer surged to his feet again, face purple. This isn't over, bailiffs closed in. He twisted toward me as they gripped his arms, Rolex scraping the rail. This game isn't over yet. His glare promised storms, but the doors swung shut behind him with a final metallic thud. Mercer is escorted out, glaring at Grace. This game isn't over yet. The courthouse doors thudded shut behind Mercer, but the echo lingered like a slammed gate in my chest. I stood in the aisle, Lily's hand still in mine, while the judge's gavel cracked twice more dismissal with prejudice costs tax to plaintiff's referral to the district attorney for criminal fraud. Darlene crumpled forward, forehead hitting the table with a dull thud that silenced the room. Ray stared straight ahead, mouth working soundlessly, as though the words he needed had been repossessed with the money. Their attorney gathered papers with shaking hands and vanished through a side exit. Mara touched my elbow. Sanctions hearing in 30 days. They'll owe your fees, the trust's fees, and punitive damages. Mercer's assets are frozen pending indictment. She spoke softly the way funeral directors speak of arrangements. I nodded, numb but not surprised. Justice had teeth. I had simply provided the bite marks. Outside, the October air carried wood smoke and the faint sweetness of fallen apples. Reporters shouted questions I ignored. Lily walked beside me to the parking lot, boots crunching gravel. What happens to Mama now? She asked. I had no gentle answer. She made choices, I said. Consequences aren't mine to soften. We hugged once, quick and fierce, then parted, she to her diner, shift me to the farmhouse and the silence I had earned. 3 days later, the hospital called. Darlene had collapsed in the county jail infirmary, dehydration, panic attack, possible stroke. The bill arrived by courier, $4, $312.47 for tests, IV fluids observation. I sat at the kitchen table with the invoice and the trust checkbook. Forgiveness was not on offer, but cruelty cost nothing extra. I wrote the check, marked it final payment, no further obligation, and mailed it certified. I did not visit. Some doors once closed stay closed. The sanctions hearing was swift. Darlene and Ray signed quitclaim deeds to any future claim, agreed to 5 years probation, and accepted a judgment of $187,000 payable over 10 years. Mercer's indictment followed wire fraud, notary tampering, conspiracy. His Rolex was auctioned to satisfy restitution. The proceeds funded a new NICU monitor. I watched none of it on the news. I had receipts to file. Lily came for coffee the Sunday after sentencing. She brought grocery store donuts and a manila envelope thick with photocopies. "Mama's stuff from storage," she said. "Thought you should see." Inside were clinic consent forms, both our names typed in faded ink, Mercer's corporate stamp in the corner. I added them to the archive without comment. Then Lily slid a second envelope across the table, plain white, postmarked State Prison. "From Mercer," she whispered. "Guard said he insisted." I opened it later alone. A single-sheet prison stationery handwriting, cramped but legible. "The final truth, only you deserve to know it." I slipped it into a fresh sleeve labeled 2025, Prison Correspondence, and locked the safe. Some truths could wait. The real work began in November. I convened the trust board, 3 accountants, 1 retired nurse, Ruth, as secretary, and proposed expansion. The NICU Fund became Grace's Legacy Foundation, a 501c3 dedicated to medical debt relief for abandoned children and fraud victims. We hired staff, built a website, solicited grants. The first national chapter opened in Joplin, staffed by a former NICU parent whose twins survived because of Earl's quiet money. The twist came in December, delivered by a locksmith I hired to open Earl's old safe behind the smokehouse wall. Inside were ledgers dating to 1948, yellowed but intact. The earliest entry, Mercer loan for tractor, $800 interest, 12% defaulted. Earl had written in red, "Scammed by Cousin Vaughn. Will repay with silence and time." Beneath the ledger lay a second will draft, never filed, dated 1950. If no direct heirs, estate, to fund trust against fraud and abandonment. Earl had planted the seed 75 years earlier, watered it with every payment to Darlene, harvested it through me. His revenge was patient, generational, perfect. I stood in the cold barn breath, fogging, and felt Mabel's hand on my shoulder, though she had been gone 25 years. The foundation's first gala raised $400,000. I wore the Navy suit, accepted the plaque, and spoke for 3 minutes about receipts and resilience. Lily stood beside me in a dress the color of riverstone. We did not mention Darlene. Spring brought the letter from prison, again thicker this time. I carried it unopened to the kitchen table, poured coffee, and set it beside the 1950 ledger. Some truths were better archived than read. I locked both in the safe and turned the key. Grace receives a prison letter. The final truth, only you deserve to know it. The prison letter sat unopened for 3 weeks, gathering dust beside the 1950 ledger like a dare. I finally slit the envelope on a Tuesday in May, the kitchen windows open to lilac and distant mower engines. Mercer's handwriting had grown shaky, the lines slanting downhill. He claimed no remorse, only explanation. Darlene had been his pawn from the beginning, 19, pregnant, terrified. He met her at a diner, offered cash for signatures she never read, promised a future that never materialized. She signed away medical consents, rental leases, even a blank power of attorney, believing each paper bought safety for the baby she couldn't keep. "She thought I was saving you," he wrote. "I was buying Earl." The confession was clinical, devoid of apology, but it closed a circle I hadn't known was open. I forwarded the letter to Mara Evidence for the appeal he would never win, then drove to the jail for the first and last time. Darlene sat in the visitation booth orange jumpsuit, swallowing her frame hair gray at the roots. She cried without sound, tears carving clean paths through powdered cheeks. "I was stupid," she whispered through the glass. "He said the papers were for insurance for your future. I signed because I was scared and broke." She pressed her palm to the partition. I kept mine in my lap. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't carry you either." She nodded, understanding the difference. Back home, I tackled the final safe, the one bolted inside Mabel's cedar chest since 1970. The combination was my birth date. The lock side opened to reveal a single envelope and a brass key. The envelope held Sheriff Tom Carter's letter written the week I came home from the hospital. "Keep receipts, Gracie," he wrote in a hand steady as justice. "They'll save others one day." The key opened a safety deposit box I never knew existed inside stock certificates, deeds, and a second trust labeled Grace's Legacy, seated in 1970, with Tom's back pay and Earl's first oil check. The men had planned farther ahead than I ever imagined. I filed the paperwork to amend my birth certificate the next morning. Grace Elizabeth Carter became Grace Elizabeth Carter. Official, irrevocable. The name I had lived anyway. Lily stood witness, eyes shining. We celebrated with grocery store cake and decaf, then launched the classes I had promised myself. Every Thursday night, the church basement filled with women, over 60 widows, retirees, grandmothers who brought bank statements and fear. I taught them to read fine print spot scams, build files the way Mabel built biscuit tins. Ruth handled trusts. Lily demonstrated online banking. Attendance doubled, then tripled. The foundation paid the rent. Summer arrived soft and green. I drove to the lake at dusk, the bracelet heavy in my pocket since the church potluck. The water lay flat as glass, reflecting the last light. I unclasped the gold links, felt the heart charm cool against my fingers, and let it fly. It arced once, glinted, then sank without a sound. I whispered to the ripples, to Mabel, to Tom, to the girl I had been. I kept the receipts, now I keep the peace. By the lake, Grace removes the old bracelet, tosses it in, and whispers, "I kept the receipts, now I keep the peace." The bracelet disappeared beneath the lake's surface with barely a ripple, taking 55 years of lies, greed, and stolen childhoods with it. I stood on the dock until the sky bled from gold to indigo, the water lapping at the pilings like a quiet amen. This is my story. Grace Elizabeth Carter, teacher, widow, survivor, keeper of receipts, and finally, keeper of peace. From the NICU incubator to the courtroom gavel, from forged signatures to a father's hidden letter. Every document, every scar, every choice led me here. Darlene chose money over motherhood. Mercer chose power over family. Earl and Tom chose protection over pride. I chose truth, and truth set the ledger straight. Now, Grace's Legacy Foundation fights nationwide, paying medical debt for abandoned kids, teaching seniors to spot scams, funding NICU rocking chairs, so no parent sits alone. Lily runs the Joplin chapter. Ruth trains the lawyers. I teach the classes every Thursday night. We don't forgive the past, we outbuild it. If you've ever been betrayed by family, cheated by a system, or doubted your own worth, this story is for you. Keep your receipts. Keep your peace. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a true story drama that turns pain into power. Drop a comment below. What's the one receipt you've kept that changed everything? Like if you believe justice delayed is still justice delivered. Share this with the strong woman in your life who needs to hear she's not alone. The algorithm loves engagement, and so do we. Your stories fuel the next fight. See you in the comments, and remember, the truth is in the details.